Welcome to the Comfortable in Chaos Podcast. Strangle your demons and let's go.
Y'all need Jesus!
As if the Comfortable in Chaos music. And I am your host here on the Comfortable in Chaos podcast. We all know it. But if the music ain't badass enough, and you know we're very culturally sensitive, we love the amalgamation that is America. But since we are in Tejas, and we're building up a little fervor shaky, why don't I just give y'all a little ditty, not about Jack and Diane. It's a favorite song of mine by Javier Molina. I've danced it many a times. A one, two, three. Way down on the border, always on a Friday night, cowboys and cowgirls, oh yeah, dance till early morning light. Here we go. Por la frontera, viernes es puro bailar, cowboys y cowgirls, oh yeah. Bailan hasta madrugar. 1 step, 2 step, 3 step, 4. Come on, everybody, get on the floor. Dance, y'all, dance the cowboy cumbia. Welcome to the Comfortable in Chaos podcast. I'm your host, as I said, Eric Hellberg, and no, we're not like Einstein. Only that we're passionately curious, not good in math, but passionately curious about all things pertaining to men. Who the hell was behind trying to shoot President Trump? How in the hell did we get here? And where is it that we are going to go in our rapid fire circle that is encapsulating us? We know it began in Ukraine. It looks like it's ending in Ukraine. But let's move on to this episode entitled The BlackRock Kid. And where did we touch upon yesterday? Of course, we mentioned BlackRock. Of course, we mentioned the shooter. We mentioned a lot of things, including illegal immigration. We talked about race a little bit. I tell you, let's just begin there. Let's begin there as we evolve along the way of this episode. How come Black pride is okay? How come Mexican pride is okay? La raza, right? How come Asian pride is okay? How come Muslim pride is okay, but white pride is racist? We talked about the original immigrants to this country. All we were as well, if it wasn't a predominantly white country as Europeans came over here, but dependent upon the time frame, also an amalgamation of many different peoples. But for some reason, that has been forgotten. It also makes me wonder if whites are so bad. Who are the primary fighters over there in this proxy war of America versus Russia and Ukraine? Russians. Let's say ethnically descended Russians. Are they white? White people. All right. Ukrainians, ethnically descended from Russia. Of course, they're bringing in bastions of people from all over the world, and now we also know that other countries are fortifying Russia to fight against the American proxy army. But they're all primarily white. Is that a war to get rid of the white man? Has that ever happened in history? World War II, whole other episode. But I'm just going to tell you, slavery began. It's a derivative. You've heard me do the episodes of the Slavic peoples. All white, all European people. I've already done episodes saying that there is slavery to this day on the continent of Africa. In the Islamic world right now, there's approximately 27 million slaves. I'm not sure of every one of their colors or any of that kind of stuff that everyone seems to be fascinated with. Of course, the color of green has lost its precedence, and that's what has America in a pickle right now. And really, no one's color matters when they're looking at George Washington on that dollar bill, right? Anyways, white slaves have been sold for centuries. All of our ancestors took slaves. Doesn't matter where you come from. Sold slaves and or were slaves. So the fact if you have a descendancy from a slave background, however long you track your lineage, here's what I'm going to tell you today. You're not special. Nope, you're not special. Everyone has come from slaves. So I think a way to right this ship is stop trying to make people feel guilty for things that they didn't do. And another great empathetic tact employed by Senile Joe, and we've addressed this as well, is to constantly mention that his son Bo, his beloved son, was killed in action. He was not killed in action, Joe, and I haven't heard you mention this for a few weeks. That's because none of the American service members that you said were never killed under your watch, although there has been thousands. The ones we know about, a.k.a. the hasty Afghanistan withdrawal, but not the others that are engaged all over the world, but they have died as well. Okay. Here's what I'm going to tell you. The reason it chaps our ass is because when you actually meet with a family member and or you address them from your bully pulpit, is the fact that you have nothing in common with their parents, these Gold Star families, because their children did fall in battle and in service to the nation. Bo did that before, but he died of cancer. The big difference is they died under your watch. Bo was not killed that way, but their sons and daughters were killed by you. All right, guys, settle down. That's right. You guys out there over the airwaves, settle down because I'm about to get you stirred back up. Now, we have heard that the Secret Service, in the matter of the BlackRock kid, and that they had liaisoned and coordinated with both Butler and Beaver counties, who were working in conjunction with one another to provide presidential security for said event. And the Secret Service says they were pretty sure that those governing jurisdictions had everything covered on that side of the fence. Although we've already talked about the fact, ultimately the responsibility for protecting the president and now presumptive nominee to become president again on the Republican side falls on the Secret Service, who was totally inept. Thank God a Secret Service sniper and or someone directly attached to him, whoever Mr. Willis was, I don't have the answer yet, acted on his own accord, disobeyed a direct order, and killed the shooter. All right. But we've also heard from the Butler County District Attorney, as well as the task force commander, that in the run-up to the event, approximately a week before, that the Secret Service was totally in charge. They let it be known that everyone would be following their lead and following suit. Well, here's where things are going to get really gnarly for us, guys. This is where it's going to get really gnarly. I could not believe when I received all the initial schematics and I dispersed it to people. I had people sending me a plethora of information on Saturday when the actual shooting occurred. And I was like, well, my God, it must be old imagery. I mean, it's a 3-building complex, and I could not make out the contents of the parking lot, but I knew they were darkened vehicles. They all seemed to have similar order. And I'm like, it has to be old imagery. My God. But no, that wasn't old imagery. That was real-time imagery. You want to know why? Because local law enforcement, meaning the task force put together for Butler and Beaver counties, was inside of the very building and or adjacent to the building whereby Matthew Thomas Crooks purportedly fired at President Trump and met his demise. Oh, yeah. Yep, that was a law enforcement command post. David Muir on the Nightly News has already run with the story. It's very crazy to me that they are running with that story, and even Newsweek has put it out. And I'm going to go through some of Newsweek's information right here. Here we go. Here we go, guys. According to a local law enforcement officer who had direct knowledge of the shooting, 3 snipers, Butler and Beaver counties had rapid response teams and sniper teams attached to the Secret Service. He says that 3 snipers were stationed inside the building in Butler, Pennsylvania, that the 20-year-old utilized to shoot at the former president. They were there. One of the snipers stationed inside the building reportedly first saw Crooks outside and looking up to the roof of the building before the suspect then left the scene. Crooks later came back and sat down while looking at his phone near the building, placed his backpack down. CBS News, bought and sold by the government, reported that a sniper at that time took a photo of the suspect when he returned. Maybe that's how they were able to run his information. Remember? But no one detained this boy. He's the only civilian over there. He's acting suspiciously. He's in what he was dressed in. And no one detains, stops, questions the man? Okay, let's carry forward. Are you getting mad yet, men? Are you getting mad? All right, listen to this. Crooks then took out a rangefinder upon his return, and the sniper who spotted him radioed the command post about the suspect's actions. But then Crooks disappeared again. Wouldn't all of those dudes run like hell and bull rush that mother? Okay, he disappeared again and returned to the building with a backpack. Secret Service snipers again alerted their command post about Crooks's actions as it had been relayed to them from the county snipers. Okay. Well, according to the source who spoke with CBS News under a condition of anonymity, Crooks had already climbed to the top of the building in question by that point. Before additional officers, they were there, arrived at the scene for backup. The suspect also positioned himself above and beyond the snipers inside of the building. Guys, you may have seen it too. I've already seen cell phone footage of the people that were present watching him. And I'm going to tell you, there was no cowardice. They videoed it for posterity via their mobile phones so that we could see it, despite him being armed. And we mentioned SSRI drugs, those inhibitor drugs, and antidepressant drugs. How could they create a zombie-like person who would be solely focused on the president, despite all the people down below him, including law enforcement, that their video cameras could catch them, meaning their phones, as he crested? I'm sure they have it with him crawling up the ladder. But I have seen the footage whereby he crests the eave of the roof, disembarks from the ladder, and begins to low crawl, rifle in his arms, to the top pitch of the roof. It's all there for everyone to see. And you know what? He would have normally felt threatened. Maybe he would have turned his gun on these people. But he didn't do that. He remained solely focused. And apparently he only broke contact from the mission per se when one officer finally crested the ladder that he had used previously. That's what my SF buddy mentioned to me. Notice I said SF, not Special Operations Forces, but SF. He then turned quickly, pointed the rifle directly at his head. The guy went to duck, fell off the ladder, and then he began his hasty motions. Could that have contributed to him missing President Trump? Well, undoubtedly so. He got off some hellified number of rounds pretty quick, though, and he was pretty damn close. Had Trump not moved his head to the right, whereby the ear was hit, that bullet, I've seen the schematics and people's diagrams that they have sent them to me, it would have hit about 2 to 3 inches into the back of his skull. I would call that an act of divine providence. So then to add further insult to injury, I mean, this is getting worse and worse. By the time that police started rushing to the scene and other officers attempted to get on the roof, the source told CBS News that a different Secret Service sniper had killed Crooks. And then you see the tactical team topside looking at the dead body. So was it the Secret Service? Was it local law enforcement that was involved? You've got to remember, and I have now watched the video, meaning the commercial, in its entirety, where BlackRock chose Bethel High School, where Thomas Matthew Crooks attended, was a senior at that time. In fact, he was front and center in BlackRock's commercial next to the teacher that BlackRock was purportedly honoring. And then at the end of the commercial, it says BlackRock is in charge of more institutional teachers' funds, meaning pension and retirement funds, since they are a prolific, in fact, the largest money manager maybe in the world, but certainly here in the United States. It says BlackRock is honored to look after the finances of these great Americans. But if BlackRock is a multinational conglomerate, richer than all get out, why did they choose Bethel High School and honor that teacher, which is literally right down the road of where this event took place? Was it because of Thomas Matthew Crooks's parents? Was it because of Thomas Matthew Crooks? I think these are sensible questions because BlackRock does commercials all around the world, but typically not in Bethel, Pennsylvania. So very interesting, men. So very interesting. And in the meantime, we know that the Secret Service, and remember I mentioned that the Secret Service director is female. Her name is Kimberly Cheadle. She's now been interviewed and says that when asked, I think Pierre something or other, I can't remember his full name, the interviewer said, well, does the buck stop with you? She hesitantly says, well, I guess the buck does stop with the Secret Service. He then asks her, is she going to step down? She said, I'm not. We take this job very seriously at the protection of both President Biden and former President Trump. And went on to say she's going to find out how it happened and how we can prevent an incident like this from ever taking place again. Well, we know that the Secret Service falls, and my guess is that is who Willis was actually in correspondence with. He just has been quieted now. He's not allowed to speak. Gag order, right? But he said his orders to not fire came from a lady. I bet it was Kimberly Cheadle. And we know that Secret Service falls under the purview of Homeland Security. And we know that this man is very competent. That's Alejandro Mayorkas. And he said, in discussing the Secret Service's leadership, we are speaking of a failure. Yet, I have full confidence in the Secret Service's leadership. Isn't he the same guy that says he has full confidence in the state of our border and that illegal immigrants are not coming across in droves? Thank you, Alejandro. Now, Joe Biden, President Biden, has come out and says, let law enforcement, we are not to guess the subject's motives. We are not to guess about who he was and or affiliated with. We need to let law enforcement, meaning the FBI, the same federal agency that arrested the counter sniper that killed the suspect. And, you know, think about it. We think about Comey. We think about Mueller. We think about the FBI concocting all the Russian collusion, their 61 signatures, where they corresponded with other intelligence officials to say Hunter's laptop, which is real, was actually a lie. The same ones that have compiled evidence against President Trump and how many fraudulent cases. But President Biden says we're not to assume the shooter's motivation, nor who he is affiliated with. Let law enforcement do its job. Do you believe in law enforcement anymore? Do you believe in the federal agency that will spend the majority of its time hiding the crimes of our elected officials, that has been weaponized against us, and that would lock us away and throw away the key quicker than they would probably slap their moms? And we're supposed to believe in them. Okay, thank you, Joe, once again. Here's what's interesting to me. They keep showing tons of footage of Thomas Matthew Crooks. And now even the Washington Post, New York Times Post are running with TMZ's video of him crawling across the top of the roof. Well, I know it's become more readily available, but they really want you to know about Thomas Matthew Crooks, the three-named would-be assassin. Did you know that there have now been interviews with the previous boys, because this is a part of the country whereby being a boy is still good and having a rifle is still good. They have shooting teams in high school. Did you know both times that Thomas Matthew Crooks tried out for his high school gun team or shooting team, he had to leave with his head hanging down because I'm sure the boys may have given him shit. That's what boys do. But his fellow students who were on the team said he was so obnoxiously bad that he could never even put a round on paper, and that it was almost downright dangerous to be around him because he was so far off in his shooting. Yet apparently the day before the incident, the shooting, the assassination attempt, he spent some time at a gun club. And now it is surfaced, we have empirical information, he was not a good enough shot. Now, he got some quick shots off before President Trump hunkered down after being nicked. And he was pretty damn close. And he did it in haste after being confronted with an officer. Yet, Thomas Matthew Crooks could not put a round down range on paper, and this wasn't from that far away. It was too dangerous to be around him with a rifle. He was that inaccurate. But now they're telling us he was at a gun club the day before, I guess honing his skills. But he was able to accomplish this while you would think he was kind of under duress. And bravo to the people who have taken all the footage despite the fact of him being armed. And he could have shot them at any time. He was in an elevated position and much closer to them, and they stood fast for us and took the videos. So now this know-nothing shooter got several rounds off at President Trump very, very close to him while under duress. It's almost as if he was myopically zoned in. Chew on that, baby. All right, chew on that, man. Let's go ahead and masticate, move that around our mouth, send it down the digestive tract. So who is BlackRock? We've been mentioning BlackRock, and in the last episode called Crooks, the BlackRock Kid. BlackRock is the world's largest asset manager, meaning management of funds from everywhere. Okay? According to Wikipedia, and this is antiquated info, 78 offices in 38 countries, clients in 100 countries. All right, there's one thing. I've told you that I have now seen the commercial that the purported shooter was involved with, as well as the teacher. For whatever reason, they chose Bethel Park High School in Butler, Pennsylvania. And let me think about this. BlackRock, Biden, Bethel Park, Butler. We've already mentioned Beaver County. These guys always work in patterns, and these are all B's. Very interesting indeed. But I don't even have to dwell on the fact that he was an actor in a BlackRock commercial in the locale where he lives and also in the locale where Trump was shot at. BlackRock has now come out And one of their spokespeople went on CNN. Here's what they said. In 2022, we ran an ad featuring a teacher from Bethel Park High School, in which several unpaid students briefly appeared in the background, including Thomas Matthew Crooks. A spokesperson for the company said on Sunday, and we will make all video footage available to the appropriate authorities, but we have removed the video now from circulation out of respect for the victims. They are acknowledging that the commercial exists. Let's move on just a little bit further. Of course, they condemned it. And interestingly enough, BlackRock is a major investor. See, they own all the other major companies, not only in the United States, but in the world. And more importantly, we know that on Monday, since today is Tuesday, that they released their quarterly earnings. Their earnings report was due yesterday, and the world's largest money manager said its assets under management had swollen to a record $10.6 trillion. And since we're talking about shooting and guns, did you know BlackRock is a majority owner in companies like Storm Ruger, an American outdoor brand, and the owner of Smith and Wesson? Well, this is no longer a conspiracy, right? They were there, and they did make a commercial right there in that same town and with the same young man that purportedly shot at President Trump. Man, oh man. So this is like Churchill Downs. We have now rounded the last corner and we are in the final stretch. And I tell you what, man, it's kind of like, I know we had badass music starting off this episode, but how about this right here? My head grew heavy and my sight grew dim. I had to stop for the night. My head is just spinning here. And yours should be as well. And we feel as crazy as if we just checked in to Hotel California, where you can check in, but you can never leave. So play a game with me. I want you to play a game with me, and then we'll talk a little bit further about this Dungeons and Dragons looking mother known as Thomas Matthew Crooks. All right. You wake up. You wake up in the morning. You haven't taken very good care of yourself. So you need your medication. Let's say it's a Pfizer medication, a Johnson & Johnson medication. You wake up after the alarm clock, you know you got to get lickety-split and get over to the office. So, hey, man, you douse that down with some water. You know who owns the majority of those companies? BlackRock. All right. Let's say you now get into whatever automobile you choose, as long as it has an American name, and hell, for that matter, a foreign name. You know who owns the majority of those companies? BlackRock. Let's say, and you heard me mention this before, you finally get into the office and you have to catch up on your emails before everyone starts sauntering in. And you use a Microsoft Window application. You know who owns the majority of that company? BlackRock. All right. And now let's delineate. Did you know that BlackRock is the majority shareholder of Boeing, McDonnell Douglas, General Dynamics, Raytheon, Lockheed Martin, KBR? You don't think they're interested in Ukraine or what goes on in the world around us? Did you know in the 2020 COVID pandemic, obviously some type of financial crisis, that BlackRock was consulted and brought in to work directly with our own Federal Reserve to insulate it from any financial insecurity? Did you know that BlackRock, with approximately $11 trillion of what they call in the biz AUM, assets under management, manages more money than the gross domestic product of every country in the world other than two. Only two countries in the entirety of our planet have a GDP that exceeds the assets under management of BlackRock, and that's America and that's China. Did you know that the Biden administration, either in its employ, has more employees of BlackRock and or previous employees of BlackRock than any other administration in history? And yes, some of them are holdovers from Barry Obama. Some of them are even holdovers from the Clinton administration. One even goes all the way back to the Carter administration, that being Mr. Donnelly. But we can do an entirely different episode on that. But my head is weary. My sight is growing dim. I'm trying to show you something. We now have a government that gets elected, but it is the best government that money can buy. And when you look at someone like a fragile Joe Biden, is it possible that he can govern and run the executive branch of government? We know it's entirely impossible. So where is that deference given? Perhaps all these unelected advisorial positions whereby present or past BlackRock executives control the narrative, and we do what it is that they want. Now, was the Secret Service compromised? They had to have been. Could BlackRock make that happen? Of course they could. Was local law enforcement compromised? Well, possibly. BlackRock had been there. If BlackRock, let's just take one example, manages the pension funds of all the teachers in those areas, these are small town communities. They know all the law enforcement. Could it be any different than Jack Ruby, who had a titty bar and all the cops used to party with him back in the day? So when Jack Ruby comes sauntering in down there at police headquarters, all the cops moved out of his way and let him walk right up to Lee Harvey Oswald? I think BlackRock could probably make that happen. It's so crazy. And now Cheadle, the woman in charge of the Secret Service, now they're going back and forth and back and forth. And that's an apt name for Cheadle. She has cheated us, and cheated us by design. She now says that they didn't put counter snipers on the roof where Crooks was, if it was Crooks, and I don't believe it was, because the slope simply made it prohibitively dangerous for their personnel. But if you looked where Willis engaged Crooks or whoever was up there, that pitch and slope was at a much more, a much more acute angle. Just notice the positioning of his tripod. And we now know that he was a Secret Service sniper. He's just been gagged. So you're telling me that this Dungeons and Dragons, that's not my terminology. This comes from an ex-level 1 Special Forces sniper who has gone on the record now, Matthew Murphy, so I will say his name, who said it was totally an inside job. And he was trained in one thing as a level 1 sniper. Level 1 means, and there's variations of snipers. There's graduations. That right there is the top, the best of the best. And so they train in assassination and counter assassinations. And he says undoubtedly there is no way that could have occurred without it being an inside job. He just didn't know who it was that was compromised at this point. He's come out on the record. Then he has offered his services for free and says if Donald Trump really needs someone who knows what they are doing, bring him on his team. And we now know that the Secret Service, even though our president has had more threats than anyone, had assigned him a temporary team under the purview of a new agent, lead agent, out of the Pittsburgh office with little to no experience. They basically gave him scrubs, and they gave him scrubs by design. We want to know. I don't give one flying about the boy who purportedly did the shooting. I want to know who orchestrated it, and I think we already have the answers. And here's what is so crucial about all this. When I have broken down different topics and stories in the past, we are talking about things where we are already behind the 8 ball. Meaning they have covered us with so much manure, lies, and filth that we have to dig our way out of the stench in order to get a clear picture. But they are desperate here. Trump is still going, and they are behind the 8 ball. So we're running alongside of our enemy. And this hastily conceived plan of theirs left many things to be desired and so many holes. And as they are removing information, we are gathering information. And I'll tell you, everything about Thomas Matthew Crooks and his parents has now been scrubbed and or wiped. I had a Twitter video because we know that Thomas Matthew Crooks, I was going to play the audio for you on this show. We know that he was purportedly a registered Republican. One of his friends actually said he did that as a joke. He was very left-leaning, and his parents too. But he had a 9-second Twitter video that went, "I am Thomas Crooks. I hate Republicans. I hate Donald Trump." And then he leans into his phone with his glasses and says, "You've got the wrong guy." He concludes the video. What the hell was he talking about? Was it like Lee Harvey Oswald, who says, "I'm just a patsy, I didn't do it," after they'd even beat him up? You could see the visible blackened eyes in the video. This is getting more and more nuanced. And I'll tell you this. I was going to do another episode on it. I don't think that Thomas Matthew Crooks did the shooting. I don't think that at all. And here's reason number one. If he did the shooting, why scrub all of his social media accounts? Why sterilize the young lad and his family? The American people deserve to know every scintilla of information about him, especially if he is the shooter. That should help us instead of impede us. But they don't want you to know anything about him other than they say he is the man who fired the shots at President Trump, and or more specifically, was allowed to. They waited approximately 30 minutes in the hopes that he could kill President Trump. But you are not going to tell me that a boy could do all of that after he failed to even make his high school rifle team, and all the boys around him said his shooting was so abhorrent they did not even want to be next to him when he had a rifle in his hands. Much less when confronted with law enforcement, whereby he was either going to be killed or taken down, he immediately has to turn around, lock back in on his target, and deliver several rounds toward President Trump. And hey, I tell you what, had President Trump been what we call paper, the target, he put a lot of effective rounds downrange very quickly. And he would have kept firing had President Trump not dropped, and he still did. It does not make any sense, but I'll tell you who also was in Pennsylvania at that time, and his social media accounts have all been scrubbed. Now, maybe he did it on his own. Maybe our wonderful government has scrubbed his as well. But that's a guy by the name of Maxwell Yerrick. You haven't heard much about him unless you have gone to alternative media sources, and maybe even foreign media sources who actually report U.S. news more accurately than our own, who attempt to hide the truth for us. Remember money? Oh yeah, by the way, all these broadcasting services, they're also owned by BlackRock. I wasn't even going to mention this until yesterday. Roger Stone came out. Who's Roger Stone? Currently under indictment. He's been arrested. He's been an advisor to past presidents. He's a close confidant of President Trump. He says, I unequivocally believe that Maxwell Yerrick was your actual shooter. And when you look, if you can still find them, and so many people have received those individual photographs and posted them on their accounts, that they are having a tremendously difficult time in pulling all of them down. If you look at Yerrick and you look at the distinguishing features, i.e. the chin, i.e. the facial hair, the pattern of the facial hair, meaning a more substantial mustache. And we know Crooks had grown his hair long. We know he had a little bit of what would we call that peach fuzz, but not like Matthew Yerrick. And not that prominent chin that you see in the photo of the deceased after being shot by Mr. Willis. The same nose, the same ears, whereby you can tell that they're scarred and gouged because they used to hold bigger earrings. The same eyes, the same brow, the same hair. Well, Roger Stone says that was your actual shooter. Thomas Matthew Crooks was just the fall guy to fit a narrative. And I'll tell you more about Maxwell Yerrick. Voted for Obama, voted for Biden, has contributed financially to both of those campaigns, also a young man. And did you know every noteworthy Antifa protest to date he was a part of? He's had multiple arrests. And did you know in 2023 he went to Ukraine? And unlike a lot of the guys who went to fight in Ukraine from other countries, he came back alive. Had he stayed, he most assuredly would have been killed. But he said, F this, I'm not going to get obliterated over here. But he was a trained marksman, more akin to someone who under duress might be able to get those shots off in a very limited period of time. Thomas Matthew Crooks simply did not have that ability. The fix was in, and it was an entirely different shooter. And in conclusion, now Ukrainians have taken to social media because they now know that President Trump, who survived the assassination attempt, has appointed J.D. Vance as our next vice president. And what is J.D. Vance vehemently opposed to? Ukrainian aid, money to Ukraine. They know this charade is about to come to an end. And you were telling me that BlackRock can't simply say, when they actually control our government, this man has to go and it will not occur. Well, you just saw what they attempted to do. So until next time on the Comfortable in Chaos podcast, I bid you bon voyage, my burgeoning flock.